Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear from inside Alabama's most controversial prison system is darker, colder, and more real than anything you've seen in a prison documentary. Holman Correctional Facility woke before dawn, but not with its usual chaos. Instead, a heavy, unnatural silence settled across cell block C. The blue prison lights cast a cold glow over the concrete, turning every shadow into something stretched and watchful. Inmates shifted in their bunks, tattoos flexing across their arms and chests as they sat upright, already sensing something off. Then the morning count alarm exploded through the block. A sharp, violent blast echoed so loudly it made the steel bars tremble. Guards sprinted along the tier walkways, radios flaring with overlapping voices. Inmates stepped to their doors, hands behind their backs, scanning each other with the kind of silent communication only people living behind bars understand. Something was wrong. The air felt too tight, too brittle. The message came through the radio like a punch. Incomplete head count. 1 inmate missing. That alone was enough to freeze the entire block. A missing inmate in a high-security prison meant lockdown, scrutiny, and suspicion. But when the name followed, even the guards exchanged uneasy looks. Marcus Hale. Inmate 41,872. A quiet, observant man covered in precise, dark tattoos that traced each muscle like a deliberate design. Hale avoided trouble. Avoided chaos. He was the type of inmate who watched everyone, said little, and only made moves that counted. The idea of him disappearing wasn't just strange, it was impossible. Officer Darren Cole reached his cell first. Everything inside looked wrong. Too perfect. The bunk was made with crisp corners. Shoes lined neatly. Clothes stacked like he was preparing for inspection. Hale never staged anything. He lived simply. Quietly. Cole crouched near the lower bunk, noticing a faint mark under the mattress. He lifted it, revealing a short message carved into the steel frame. Check the wall. His pulse kicked. He pressed his hand against the concrete until he felt a slight movement, a hidden seam. He dug his fingers in and pulled, revealing a concealed cavity behind the wall. Empty. But the dust inside had finger marks, smeared in the last few hours. Something had been hidden there for a long time, and taken just before Hale vanished. Warden Samuel Ridge entered seconds later, his face shadowed with irritation and worry. Get surveillance, he ordered. Full review. Every angle. Every second. But surveillance created more questions than answers. The footage showed Hale's door closed all night. No guard entered. No inmate approached. The camera angle didn't glitch, flicker, or distort. Hale never crossed the threshold. Lena Ward, an investigator brought in for internal reviews, leaned closer to the screen. He didn't use the door, she said quietly. And this camera isn't malfunctioning. Someone planned this. Cole stared at her. You think he was taken? I think someone wants it to look like he wasn't. The inmates sensed the tension spreading through the block. They could feel it in the guard's posture and the sudden strictness in every command. Deshaun Tate, a heavily tattooed lifer with thick black ink covering both arms, spoke through his bars. Hale ain't sloppy, he murmured to another inmate. If he's gone, somebody helped make him gone. Or planted something, the other replied. Feels staged. Lockdown orders followed. Doors slammed shut. Showers paused. Yard time canceled. The prison's atmosphere thickened into something claustrophobic and electric. Then a discovery changed everything. A guard found a metal shank lying in the communal showers, clean, polished, untouched by rust. Almost waiting to be found. Scratched into the handle was a symbol, a circle intersected by 3 sharp lines. The same symbol tattooed behind Hale's left ear. Cole's throat tightened. He would never leave this behind. Lena studied it carefully. It wasn't left. It was placed. Someone wants us to follow a trail, and believe the wrong story. Warden Ridge exhaled slowly, frustration settling deep. Inside job. Or someone with access, Lena replied. Prisons run on routines. If you know those routines well enough, you can hide anything. Minutes later, another discovery surfaced. Officer Ramirez found a folded note wedged under a metal utility door. Same symbol on the front. The handwriting inside was clean, calm, deliberate. He never left. Look deeper. Cole felt the hair rise on his arms. Notes inside a high-security block didn't just appear. Someone had walked right up to the edge of guard patrol routes and placed it with confidence. Holman felt different now. The inmates exchanged looks rich with information. Some stood still at their bars, tattoos shifting under the lights as they absorbed the tension. Others paced as if calculating new moves. And deep in the facility the rumors grew louder. Some said Hale planned this. Some said guards were involved. Some said someone wanted to start something bigger. But Lena had a different read. Hale didn't run, she said softly. He was moved. And whoever moved him controlled the cameras, the timing, and the message. Cole swallowed. So where is he now? Lena glanced toward the far end of the corridor where the lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the concrete. Somewhere inside these walls, she said. And someone wants us to think otherwise. The deeper the team looked, the more wrong everything felt. The cavity. The staged cell. The planted shank. The symbol. The note. This wasn't a disappearance. It was a trigger. A deliberate push meant to activate an investigation and pull certain people into it. Holman had seen violence, riots, smuggling, and escapes. But this was different. This was quiet. Calculated. Almost surgical in its precision. As guards tightened their patrols and investigators spread across the block, one truth became impossible to ignore. Marcus Hale had not escaped Holman Correctional Facility. He had been hidden inside it. And the people responsible were watching. Holman Correctional Facility was locked down. The disappearance of Marcus Hale had shattered the fragile calm of the morning, turning routine corridors into tension-filled zones under cold, blue fluorescent lights. Each cell block hummed with the low vibration of surveillance monitors, the clack of boots on concrete, and the subtle whispers of tattooed inmates who watched every move. Inmates shifted in their bunks, inked arms flexing under the harsh lighting, eyes scanning each shadow. Investigator Lena Ward moved methodically through cell block C, observing, analyzing, noting micro-expressions invisible to the untrained eye. Tattoos weren't just skin art, they were silent signals of allegiance, respect, and hierarchy. Every subtle glance, every slight gesture, communicated volumes to those who understood. Hale's disappearance had turned these silent networks into sources of both insight and threat. The first interviews began immediately. Officers brought forward the key witnesses, guards on duty near Hale's cell, inmates who had reported unusual activity, and administrative staff with access to restricted areas. Every word, every pause, every gesture mattered. Criminal psychology in a prison setting was a high-stakes game. Misinterpretation could mean missing the truth entirely. Deshaun Tate, heavily tattooed from neck to forearm, was one of the first to be interviewed. He leaned casually against the metal table, eyes sharp, body language controlled. "Where was Marcus Hale last night?" Lena asked. "Lights out." "He stayed in his bunk," Deshaun said. His voice was steady, but the flicker in his tattooed arm betrayed awareness. "And no one approached him?" He shrugged, a muscle under his ink twitching. "I mind my business. You should too." Every witness contributed fragments, inconsistencies, and subtle cues. Officers Cole and Ramirez cross-referenced the surveillance footage with duty rosters, noting anomalies in camera angles and blind spots in hallway coverage. Patterns began to emerge. Someone had moved within the block while all assumed lockdown protocols were airtight. The manipulation was precise, deliberate, almost surgical. Other tattooed inmates whispered in muted tones, gestures communicated silently. Prison gangs weren't violent in this investigation context, but their networks mattered. Knowing who could move, who could communicate across blocks, and who could exploit structural blind spots became essential. A minor breakthrough came when Lena reviewed CCTV footage in slow motion. A shadow appeared briefly near the maintenance door, a figure too small to be a guard, too deliberate to be random. Its arm displayed dark swirling tattoos, faint but identifiable as someone connected to Hale. Even this fleeting moment suggested coordinated movement and intentional obfuscation. Carlos Vega, another tattooed inmate, was questioned next. His forearms bore faded navy ink, veins faintly visible. Lena asked, "Did anyone tell you to stay quiet about Hale?" Carlos swallowed, eyes darting slightly. "No. But people here don't like surprises." His glance hinted at a network operating beneath the surface, invisible to anyone outside the walls. Meanwhile, Warden Ridge convened senior staff. "This isn't just a missing inmate. It's coordination, access, and compliance failures. Someone inside is orchestrating this." The blue-toned fluorescent lights accentuated the deep lines on his face, highlighting the gravity of a systemic breach. Forensic teams scoured corridors and cell blocks, identifying subtle scuff marks and disruptions. Small details, a scratch on concrete, a slightly shifted utility door, a faint fingerprint, began forming a map of movement, revealing deliberate exploitation of the prison's architecture. Lena traced each rotation, transfer, and equipment delivery, correlating with surveillance footage. Patterns suggested coordination between at least two parties, one familiar with Hale's routines, the other with the building's structural weaknesses. Inmates whispered to one another, tattooed arms signaling silent communication. Deshaun Tate gestured toward distant cell blocks, Carlos Vega observed from stairwells. These movements indicated alliances and possibly orchestrated actions aimed at keeping Hale hidden, or at sending a deliberate message to the investigation. A critical anomaly emerged in the laundry corridor. A brief flicker in the camera feed coincided with scheduled deliveries. Someone had exploited a routine, moved within blind spots, and left minimal evidence. A textbook manipulation of a high-security prison environment. As interviews continued, subtle discrepancies became apparent. Guards recalled slightly different sequences, timing of rounds varied by seconds. Small miscommunications between staff revealed gaps in protocol. Lena recognized these as evidence not of negligence but exploitation. Someone had observed and planned around every protocol. The psychological tension inside Holman intensified. Inmates became wary of each other, guards scrutinized every interaction, and administrative staff began questioning standard procedures. Every detail mattered. A misplaced key, a quiet movement in the yard, a shadow in a hallway. Hale's disappearance had set off a cascade of hypervigilance, bringing the prison's inner workings into sharp relief. By nightfall, patterns of coordination, subtle breaches, and inmate alliances had emerged. Evidence hinted at deliberate action, a movement orchestrated to appear spontaneous, but in reality executed with precision. The CCTV shadow, the scuff marks, the misaligned doors, all pointed toward an inside operation. But the central question remained unanswered. Where was Marcus Hale? Who had orchestrated his disappearance? The blue-toned lights of cell block C cast long, sharp shadows. Guards patrolled tighter, eyes scanning every corner. Surveillance monitors glowed, replaying every frame, every second. Tattooed inmates observed silently, evaluating the investigators' movements, protecting secrets and calculating risks. Somewhere in Holman, hidden in plain sight, the first substantial clue awaited discovery. It would reveal the depth of manipulation, the alliances, and the calculated planning that had allowed Marcus Hale to vanish without a trace. The internal investigation had begun, but the answers were buried deep within the walls, waiting for those who could see the patterns, decode the psychology, and follow the shadows. Night had fallen over Holman Correctional Facility, but darkness didn't bring peace. The blue-toned fluorescent lights flickered along the corridors, reflecting faintly off concrete floors and steel doors. The air smelled of disinfectant, sweat, and tension, a mixture that clung to every tattooed inmate in an orange uniform as if branding them to the walls themselves. Marcus Hale's disappearance had ignited a storm of suspicion. Inmates whispered in code, tattoos shifting under the blue glow as they communicated silently. Guards were on edge, pacing slower, eyes darting to corners and stairwells. Surveillance monitors replayed hours of footage over and over, revealing patterns, blind spots, and movements that seemed almost choreographed. The first real sign of rising danger came in the laundry corridor. A blue-tinted camera frame showed a fleeting figure, heavily tattooed, moving with deliberate precision. A guard passed the hallway a few seconds later, too late to intercept. Every subtle detail indicated that someone inside the prison knew exactly how to exploit timing, surveillance, and guard routines. Officer Darren Cole and Ramirez huddled near the monitor bank, whispering. "That's not Hale," Ramirez said. "But he's connected." "Someone's testing us," Cole replied. "Or baiting us." Meanwhile, within cell block C, the inmates were restless. Deshaun Tate leaned against the wall, orange jumpsuit wrinkled, tattoos glinting faintly in the blue light. His eyes scanned every guard, every movement, measuring tension and opportunity. Across the corridor, Carlos Vega shifted his stance, subtly signaling another inmate. Silent coordination in plain view, unspoken but unmistakable to anyone who knew the code. The internal investigation created pressure points. Guards started noticing subtle defiance, minor infractions, whispered conversations, and unusual loitering in empty corridors. Small discrepancies became clues. Lena Ward compiled the anomalies: a misaligned door handle here, a shadow where no one should be there, footprints in areas thought inaccessible. Every detail formed a map pointing toward Hale's possible location, and the people aiding him. Suddenly, a call crackled over the radio. Officer Ramirez had found a note tucked under a maintenance panel near the showers. Same symbol from Hale's shank, 3 intersecting lines inside a circle, scratched in precise handwriting. This time the note contained only one word. Watch. Cole's chest tightened. Lena's eyes narrowed. Whoever left it wanted attention. They were escalating. The tension wasn't confined to surveillance. Inside cell block C, the pressure mounted between the inmates themselves. Small alliances began to fracture. Tattooed arms flexed as men assessed potential threats and opportunities. Deshaun Tate moved closer to an isolated corner, speaking in hushed tones to two others, their orange uniforms vibrant under the blue lights. Lena noted every movement, analyzing criminal psychology and behavior. In a prison, stress could turn silence into confession and loyalty into betrayal. She observed the unspoken power plays, who held influence, who avoided attention, and who could be coerced. The real danger revealed itself during a routine cell check. Officer Cole opened a cell and found a partially concealed cavity behind the mattress frame. Inside there was a folded piece of paper, tattooed fingerprints smudged on the edges, barely legible. It was a map of the corridors, marking blind spots, guard rotations, and surveillance angles. Someone was orchestrating a full plan from inside the prison. Word spread quickly among staff, though carefully. Warden Ridge convened a high-level briefing in the administrative office. "We're not just dealing with a missing inmate," he said. "We're dealing with a calculated internal threat. Someone has manipulated routines and surveillance to a level I've never seen before." The next few hours were chaotic. Officers moved through corridors systematically, double-checking blind spots, while surveillance teams replayed footage in blue-tinted slow motion. Every inmate interaction became a potential lead. Tattooed hands shifted, eyes flicked, bodies adjusted, all under the watchful gaze of investigators and officers alike. Even outside the cells, subtle danger was escalating. In the yard, a small group of inmates clustered in orange uniforms, tattoos visible on forearms and necks. They communicated silently, calculating as if anticipating the investigators' moves. The prison's atmosphere felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode at any wrong movement. Then came the first breakthrough. A faint, partially obscured fingerprint on the shower note matched a registered inmate from another block, someone who had appeared insignificant until now. Lena cross-referenced the record and realized the inmate had access to maintenance areas during off-hours. This suggested a network of participants, not a single individual. The investigation was no longer simple. It had become a multi-layered game of manipulation, alliances, and hidden agendas. The night ended with one undeniable truth. Marcus Hale was not merely hidden. He was being protected, or used, by a network of inmates with precise knowledge of the prison's vulnerabilities. Every scuff mark, misaligned camera, and coded tattoo hinted at someone inside orchestrating the movements and controlling perception. By dawn, Holman Correctional Facility had transformed. What was once a rigid, controlled environment had shifted into a tense chessboard. Guards watched the smallest gestures, surveillance screens displayed every angle in a cold blue hue, and inmates moved with quiet calculation. Tattooed arms flexed, eyes observed, and alliances tightened in anticipation. Rising danger wasn't just a concept, it was real. Every investigation step, every observation carried risk. Someone inside was watching the investigators as closely as the investigators watched them. The psychological stakes, the threat of exposure, and the possibility of manipulation had elevated the case to a level where one wrong move could tip the balance. The network of deception, control, and careful coordination hinted at a deeper truth waiting to be uncovered. Marcus Hale's disappearance had set off a chain reaction, and the investigation was only just beginning to untangle a web of calculated danger inside the blue-toned walls of Holman Correctional Facility. Morning arrived with a pale, cold light reflecting off Holman Correctional Facility's steel bars. The blue-toned fluorescent lights in the corridors flickered faintly, enhancing the tension that had gripped the prison for days. Tattooed inmates in orange jumpsuits moved with cautious precision, whispering in silent codes, observing investigators and calculating every step of the unfolding investigation. Lena Ward and her team pored over surveillance logs, maintenance reports, and cell block schematics. Every frame, every detail, every anomaly was re-examined under a microscope. The previous discoveries, the scuff marks, misaligned doors, fleeting shadows on cameras, were not random. They pointed to coordination and deliberate concealment. It became increasingly clear that Marcus Hale's disappearance was part of a wider plan orchestrated by multiple parties within the prison. Inside cell block C, tension simmered. Deshaun Tate leaned against the wall, tattoos visible under the blue light, eyes scanning fellow inmates. Across the corridor, Carlos Vega, equally tattooed, observed the guards, noting patrol patterns and camera angles. Subtle gestures and silent communications indicated that the network protecting Hale extended beyond a single cell block. Some inmates were allies, others were pawns, and the power dynamics were shifting rapidly. The breakthrough came when Lena cross-referenced the fingerprint found on the shower note with the maintenance roster. The print belonged to a low-profile inmate named Terrence T.J. Williams. His orange jumpsuit was always neat, tattoos covering both forearms and visible along his neck. T.J. was known for staying out of trouble, rarely interacting with high-profile inmates. Yet, his fingerprints on critical evidence suggested involvement. Interviews revealed conflicting stories. Deshawn insisted he had no knowledge, while Carlos hinted at a lot of quiet movement in the middle of the night. TJ, when questioned, displayed calm detachment, tattoos shifting under his sleeve as he leaned forward. He claimed ignorance, but his body language suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, Warden Ridge and the senior staff gathered to analyze movement patterns across the facility. The CCTV footage had revealed subtle deviations in guard rotations, brief shadowy movements near blind spots, and anomalies in routine maintenance schedules. Each anomaly seemed minor individually, but when mapped together they formed a trail, one that suggested someone was orchestrating Hale's concealment with precision. Lena's team began mapping the prison like a chessboard. They marked patrol points, blind spots, and likely escape corridors within the walls. They discovered a series of hidden passages and service routes rarely used by guards, effectively creating internal corridors for controlled movement. It was here, in these hidden pathways, that Hale had likely been moved, shielded from surveillance. The psychological element became clearer. Inmates involved were carefully chosen, those with tattoos signaling loyalty, visibility, and discretion. Guards unknowingly aided the plan by sticking strictly to protocol, allowing calculated manipulation of routine. Criminal psychology and behavior in Holman were exploited expertly. Fear, routine, and hierarchy were leveraged to control perception. During an afternoon cell check, a guard discovered a hidden cache behind a maintenance panel in cell block D. Inside were items that suggested communication between inmates across blocks, coded notes, maps of patrols, and small tools for discrete movement. The items were untouched, their placement deliberate. Someone wanted the investigators to find them, but only after careful observation and analysis. The network of protection around Hale began to unravel. Cross-referencing notes, shadowed movements, and the behaviors of key inmates revealed that T.J. Williams acted as the coordinator. He used the loyalty networks of Deshawn Tate and others, leveraging their status and influence within the block. The system wasn't chaotic, it was structured. Every tattooed hand, every glance, every whispered gesture had purpose. Lena realized the full scope of the operation. Hale wasn't hidden by chance. He was being shielded from potential threats, strategically moved along underutilized corridors, and subtly directed to maintain his invisibility. Meanwhile, the planted clues, the shank, the notes, the fingerprints, acted as triggers for the investigation, controlling its pace and direction. Inmates were simultaneously cooperating and manipulating. Deshawn's subtle gestures directed allies, Carlos's observations ensured the plan remained unnoticed, and TJ coordinated movements with precision. Guards, unknowingly, followed protocol while being observed. The prison had become a living, breathing system of hidden operations, invisible to anyone not reading the signs carefully. By evening, surveillance footage revealed subtle patterns of alignment between the tattoos and the movements. Inmates positioning in orange uniforms created a rhythm, almost like choreography, signaling coordination without words. Every block, hallway, and yard corner became part of an invisible communication network, one that had allowed Hale to remain unseen. The internal investigation had peeled back layers of deception. Motives were revealed: protection, loyalty, and calculated risk. Alliances among tattooed inmates had allowed them to control information flow. The warden and investigators realized the true complexity of Holman Correctional Facility. Not just a place of confinement, but a system where psychology, alliances, and careful planning determined survival and influence. As night settled over the facility, Lena Ward stood before the blue-lit corridors of cell block C. Every shadow, every whispered gesture, and every tattoo told a story. The truth behind the walls was clear. Marcus Hale's disappearance was not random. It was meticulously orchestrated, executed by a network of inmates exploiting routines, exploiting perception, and exploiting every subtle weakness in the system. The investigation was no longer about locating a missing inmate, it was about understanding a hidden system, decoding human behavior under pressure, and tracing the invisible lines of power within Holman. The pieces were falling into place, but the final confrontation, the ultimate revelation, still lay ahead. The blue-toned lights flickered as the facility settled into tense silence. Tattooed inmates in orange jumpsuits shifted in their bunks, observing and calculating, fully aware that the walls themselves now held the story, and those who understood it had the power. The truth behind the walls was coming into focus. But even as the investigators pieced together the hidden networks, one question remained: who would control the next move, and what price would it exact inside Holman Correctional Facility? The blue-tinted lights of Holman Correctional Facility hummed with tension. Days of surveillance, interviews, and forensic work had brought investigators to the edge of understanding. The network protecting Marcus Hale had been partially decoded, alliances mapped, and vulnerabilities exploited, but the final confrontation required precision. Inside cellblock C, tattooed inmates in orange jumpsuits moved with calculated caution. Deshaun Tate and Carlos Vega exchanged subtle glances, aware of investigators observing from every angle. The entire block seemed alive with silent anticipation. Every footstep, every shadow, every flex of inked arms carried meaning. The psychological stakes were as high as any physical confrontation could ever be. Lena Ward reviewed the final pieces of evidence. Scuff marks along the corridors, surveillance anomalies, fingerprint matches, coded notes, and hidden caches. It became clear that T.J. Williams had coordinated Hale's concealment, leveraging the loyalty and influence of his tattooed allies. The operation was precise, almost surgical, a system within the prison system. As the clock approached midnight, officers moved to execute the final search. Every corridor, every stairwell, and every maintenance route was covered. Tattooed inmates in orange uniforms were carefully monitored, their subtle gestures and silent signals recorded. The tension was palpable. One misstep could compromise the operation. The breakthrough came in a shadowed corridor near the laundry area. A faint movement caught the eye of Officer Ramirez. Hale, tattooed and in an orange jumpsuit, emerged from a previously unnoticed maintenance exit. The investigators had traced his route, predicted his path, and now had him contained without incident. T.J. Williams, standing nearby with arms crossed and tattoos visible in the blue glow, was carefully apprehended. His calm demeanor suggested he had expected this outcome. He had orchestrated the plan but respected its limits. Deshaun and Carlos, observing silently, had played their parts without escalation. The intricate network of alliances was intact, but the system had finally been cracked by careful observation, pattern analysis, and understanding of criminal psychology within the prison. Inside the administrative office, Warden Ridge and Lena reviewed every detail. Each piece of evidence, each shadowed movement, each coded gesture had been analyzed. The truth was fully revealed. Hale had not escaped, nor had chaos consumed Holman. Instead, the events exposed the complexity of prison life, the subtle manipulation, silent alliances, and strategic exploitation of routine that allowed a network of tattooed inmates in orange jumpsuits to control perception. The internal investigation concluded with careful documentation, ensuring no aspect of the network remained hidden. Surveillance logs, forensic evidence, and witness interviews were consolidated. Lessons were noted: procedural vulnerabilities, psychological manipulation, and the importance of observation beyond routine. Yet, as the prison returned to normal routines, subtle signs remained. A shadow in a corridor, a tattooed hand flexing under the blue light, a whispered glance exchanged in silence. Reminders that the system within the walls was living, evolving, and always aware. Holman Correctional Facility was secure, Hale accounted for, and the investigation closed. But the story behind the walls would continue to linger. The final observation was clear. In a system built on control, confinement, and hierarchy, those who understood the human element could shape perception and influence outcomes. The network within Holman was exposed, but the lessons endured. Vigilance, psychology, and alliances mattered as much as steel bars and surveillance cameras. As the blue-tinted lights dimmed for the night, Lena Ward turned from the corridors one last time. The prison was calm, but calm in Holman was never permanent. Tattooed inmates in orange jumpsuits settled into bunks, shadows playing across the walls. And somewhere, a subtle, unspoken reminder lingered. If this prison case stunned you, the next one will be even darker. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The investigation was complete, the final confrontation resolved, but the lessons of Holman Correctional Facility, the human, psychological, and systemic intricacies, remained.